We are. Wow, what an awesome ministry. Thank you so much. Have you ever had that experience of someone, just like Ashley was singing about, who loved you when you were at your worst, who saw you at your worst, and they stood by you? We're going to talk a little bit about that today. As Brenda said, my name is Beth Hitesman. I'm a ministerial candidate, and I don't do podiums well. Normally I like to sit and move, so just follow me. I'm kind of like a ping pong game watch going on up here. So we're in a series, if it's your first time here, we're in a series based on the book, Eye of the Storm. And this week we are talking about letting go and letting God. And if you haven't been here, that's fine. Just catch in where we are. So today the concept is letting go and letting God, and we hear it so much that I think we become numb to it. I remember my first memory of really letting go and letting God happened years ago. I was dealing with a situation in my life that was just really tough. It was frustrating. I didn't know what to do. And I was in church at that time, so we would pray about it, and I would read books. And I just didn't know what to do. And about after a year, I went to a group of ladies that I pray with, my prayer partners, and I said, I can't do this anymore. I'm done. I am forgetting about it. I'm going to let it go, and I'm going to give it over to God. And one of the ladies says, oh, wow, has it come to that? Whoa. You know, and Emily Cady, she's a very prolific Unity writer. She says that's our tendency on how we let things go. We deal with it, and we struggle with it, and we fight with it until we get to the point we can't take it anymore, and then we look at people and go, can you believe this? I gotta let it go now. So I'm gonna give it to God, and if God has any good ideas, I might consider them. And that seems to be our human nature in letting go. But have you ever been in a situation where you've had to let something go? Maybe it was a person, maybe it was a situation. And what happens when you let it go? As soon as you let it go, it starts what? Transforming, and it starts healing. If you go to counseling, they're going to tell you the best way to heal is to recognize what it is and then learn how to let it go. In Alcoholics Anonymous, they say until you release it, you cannot heal. So why do we have so much problems letting things go? There's something about that in our human nature. So what I do is when I want to learn how to transform my life, I go to the great masters. And today, two great masters were speaking to me. One was Jesus. The second was Martin Luther King Jr. And in December in 1957, Martin Luther King Jr. did a speech at the Dexter Baptist Church. And when he went to the church, he said, the speech and the story I'm going to tell you is a story you've heard before. I keep repeating it over and over and over so we all get it at a deep level. And every time I hear the words, I hear it deeper and I transform more. Jesus in the Bible one time was speaking to a group, and he was talking to them, and he said, your law says an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. But what I'm telling you is, if someone smacks you across the face, turn the other cheek. It's probably something we're all familiar with, right? So for us to get a really deep understanding of what that means, we have to go back to history to what Jesus was saying to those people in their time. So when we read those words, it's like, well, obviously, duh, this is why Jesus said it. It's a little barbaric. Like if someone hurts us and gouges out our eye, it's not nice to have someone stand up and gouge their eye back. Or if someone punches us in a bar and knocks our tooth out, it's not right to go stand in a bar and have them knock the tooth out. But that's how we interpret it. That is not how the ancients interpreted it when Jesus said that. That law was based on the law of talion, also the law of retaliation. They didn't hear it literally, you gouge my eye, so I'm gouging your eye. It was actually a very fair and a very just law. And what the law said was, if someone harms someone else, the punishment can be no stronger than the harm. So it would be just the same if Jesus came to us today. He would be saying, your law says, let the punishment fit the crime. And we would all go, Jesus would go, I'm telling you, turn the other cheek. So these people back then were probably as confused as we are by that. So what do you mean? You mean you're telling me that if someone murders someone, we're just supposed to go, we love you, turn the other cheek? Not at all. And Jesus didn't mean that back then. Jesus never concerned himself with the things that were of Caesar. He says, I'm here to uphold the laws. He wasn't trying to change them, but what he was talking about were spiritual principles that only a few could understand. And as I was researching today, I understood what Jesus understood. I understood what Martin Luther King Jr. understood, and I understood what Gandhi understood for the very, very first time. So let's take a look at this eye for the eye thing. How does it show up for us today? The only example I've got to do is give a confession. So if we could keep this amongst friends, I would really appreciate it. But I'm a ministerial student, so I really try Unity practices. I'm trying to set a good example, but many times I just fail. Especially this one guy who comes into my life about the time I'm happy and peaceful, and he can push every button I have. And I get so frustrated because I know it happens. And he'll do stuff, and it's like, I don't like the way he talks to his wife. I don't like the way he treats his children. I certainly don't like the way he treats me. And all of a sudden, I realize before I know it, I am in this frenzy. And then do you know what I do? I go tell my friends about it because they don't like him either. So that's our pattern from the eye to the eye. Someone does something to us, well, we feel justified in eyeing them back, and then we're going to go tell everybody else about how righteous we are. So that's what Jesus meant from eye to eye. Martin Luther King Jr., in that speech, gave a wonderful story about his brother. His brother and him were driving from Atlanta to Chattanooga. And this was back probably the early 1950s, so they didn't have a lot of street lamps. And have you ever gone down a 2-lane highway? You haven't. You're going to have to go for a ride this afternoon. But at night, the 2-lane highway, it's really dark, and you can't see. And his brother was getting very frustrated because people were coming up with their high beams. And you know what happens? What happens when people come up with their high beams? You go blind. You could go off the road on a small road if it's windy. You could go off the road. And the brother had had enough of this, and he said, I can't take this anymore. The next person who comes around the corner and doesn't dim their lights, I am hitting them with my high beams. Mine aren't going down. So Martin Luther King said, okay, no, wait, not a good idea. He said, because when you meet their eye with your eye, my words, they're not his, but you get the point, it can create chaos, and it's not helpful. We need someone with enough spirituality and enough insight to dim the lights. So that's the whole message of eye for eye. It's to stop our consciousness that when this has happened and this has happened and this is happening, to get enough insight to dim the lights. And when you turn the other cheek, it's a change in consciousness. And you know why it's so important? And this is why Martin Luther King talked about it over and over and over on a civil level, on an international level, and on a personal one-to-one level with family and friends and relatives. If we keep going eye to 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 eye, it escalates. It doesn't happen. So what Martin Luther King Jr. said is we need to learn to turn the other cheek. We need to let go. Because he understood and got the secret on why. He understood what Jesus was talking about. He got it. It was his sole purpose. Because as long as we're going eye to eye to eye to eye, nothing will ever, ever change. But what Martin Luther King believed in, and King was a huge student of Gandhi, what Gandhi believed in is once you let go, a transformational power happens that will not happen as long as we're attached to it. So when we let go, it's just not a thing we'd be nice to do. This is what Jesus is saying. If you want to transform your world, you have to do it this way. And that's what all the great masters do. And it is not easy. Like Brenda said in the meditation, surrendering is not waving a white flag. Martin Luther King said there are 3 things that we can do when we're up against a person, up against a situation. There's 3 things we can do. So we need to make this very clear that we're not surrendering. Number 1 is we can react with violence, which means when someone does something to us, we react back the same way because we think it's justified. Number 2, and he says equally as bad, is we just throw up our hands and say there's nothing we can do. So that's not what they're talking about letting go. Dr. Martin King worked in non-violence, but it was a non-violence in power. And Jesus worked in that with the Roman Empire. He knew strongly. He didn't accept what was going on. He didn't say it was okay, we're just going to let it go. He's just saying, I'm not going to react the way you are, because the only way to heal a situation is to let go, to release what is going on. So King said the best way to do this takes some work. It really takes some serious, I guess I would say come to Jesus thought process. And it begins with self-evaluation. Jesus said, eye for an eye, because in the Bible it says a man thinks he is right in his own eyes. So can I give an example of that? Did anyone see the Facebook post yesterday? A friend of mine put it by, and it was a 1950s article in the New York Times. And the question was, is it okay for a man to spank his wife? Okay. So that sounds a little silly to us, but can anyone go back to the 1950s, early in the time, when that was actually a very acceptable practice? You would have, the answers they gave were incredible, like, yes, the man is the head of the house, and if the wife is out of line, it is his duty and responsibility to keep that wife in line. And this whole list of people explain why you need to spank your wife. So in the consciousness of the time, I could go up, we would laugh at them, and if you would have laughed at them, they would have gone, "You sinners. Do you not understand? We have a duty, we have a responsibility to keep our families in line." They wouldn't have gotten what you were saying. And also like with disciplining of children, children were kind of like just sent out for the day, come back later at night. And a lot of the discipline that they did was by, "Well, you're an idiot. Don't you think you could do better?" Because we try to motivate them by, thinking if we cut them down and we put them down, they're going to become better persons. But psychology has showed the damage in that there's a better way to parent. But there was a time in the consciousness of our society where people thought, if we don't treat our kids that way, they're going to become spoiled, they're going to become rotten. They wouldn't have understood. So what Jesus asks and what Martin Luther King asks is to recognize that we probably have some of those consciousness in us that we're not aware of yet. So he asks us to look at the consciousness. And I think one of those things is the eye to eye to eye. Because when someone does something to us, and then we yell it back at them, and then we go tell everyone else, we're like the back in the 50s. "Well, they deserved it. You don't understand. They can't get away with this stuff." And I think what Luther and Jesus are saying is, we need a higher consciousness. We need to look at this from a different level, and it's hard for us to see. I got smacked in the face with this. When my husband and I were first married, we had gone into some counseling. And because I was a young married bride and everything bothered me. If he kept the lid off the toothpaste, it was a crisis. If he didn't put the lid down on the toilet, it was a crisis. But my biggest thing was football. So he worked, I worked. Yeah, I'm going to preach to you, buddy. So he worked, and I worked. And on the weekends, all I wanted to do as a loving, wonderful wife who cared about my husband, who cared about my children, was to spend time with this man. And all he cared about was Dallas Cowboys. So, sometimes the Steelers too. There were two loves in his life. So I told my counselor, because I know she would understand, because all I want is love and attention, and I'm doing the right thing, surely. So she had us made a list to get it out of our system. She said, "What does your husband do?" And I said, "He sits there and he watches TV." And she said, "So how do you react to that?" "Not happy." "Well, what do you do?" "Well, I pout. I give him the eye. And then he ignores me. Sometimes I'll go to the kitchen and I'll slam a cupboard. And I will withhold candy, the little ones." Thanks, sweetheart. Yes, I withhold candy. Okay, so we made a list. And she said, read your list. She said, "So what does your husband do?" I said, "He watches TV and he lays there." "What do you do?" "I pout. I throw a temper tantrum. I slam cupboard doors. I let him know, and I withhold candy." Yummy. So by seeing that, I realized that when I went to counseling, I really thought I was righteous, because look at the horrible stuff that was my husband's do. But this is what Jesus said is how we have a tendency, and we're not even aware of it, to call out the speck in someone else's eye when we have a log in our own eye. So this is where self-awareness comes, maybe admitting that we don't see everything about ourselves the way we should see it. Not as a matter of condemnation, but a matter of healing. So Martin Luther King says, awareness is the absolute key. We have to admit that there are going to be people out there who are not going to like us. They may not like us because of our race. They may not like us because we're a Yankee. They may not like us because our hair's the wrong color. They may not like us because anything's right. They may not like us because we're triggering something in our past. They may not like us for reasons we don't even understand. But what they ask us to remember is what's in them is also in us. I'd like to contradict something that I hear. People say that we're hardest on ourselves than we are anyone else. And sometimes I really question that. I think sometimes that's true, but sometimes I wonder. Because I don't know about you, has anybody ever cut anybody off in traffic or something, or maybe even caused a wreck? And when I do, I feel horrible. I just feel like, oh my goodness, I can't believe I did that. I can't believe I did that. But let someone cut me off. I'm going eye for eye. I can't believe they did that. And then I'm going to work and I'm going to tell everybody else about this jerk on the street. And I know there's times that I've not shown up as my best. Maybe especially with my husband. I've just shown up pouting and doing the things that I don't want to do. And when I do it, it's like, oh my gosh, I'm sorry, I had a long day. I need forgiveness. But whoa, if someone talks to us the wrong way, they got another thing coming. So I think this is what Dr. King and Jesus were talking about, eye to eye to eye. We need to take a step back, not for condemnation, no, not at all, but to realize we need to rethink. We may not have all the information about how we're behaving, that 50 years from now they're going to laugh. It's like, can you believe that when someone yelled at them, they yelled back? Ha ha ha! The congregation 50 years from now may be so enlightened that this is a funny situation for them. They may not even understand it. So what Jesus and Martin Luther are saying, this is what means eye to eye. We get the eye to eye part now, right? So when you turn the other cheek, it's a very active thing. Martin Luther King says it takes a brave person to act this way. And it comes from a state of agape. Now, once again, I know we've heard this word before, so I'm going to break it down really, really quickly. There are 3 types of love. There's an eros love, which means, oh, I love you, honey. I can't wait to be with you, and it's going to be great. There's a philia love, which is the brotherly love. That means if you're nice to me, I'm going to be nice to you. You're in my family. You're my kin. And then there's the agape love, which I think we need to make clear has nothing to do with an emotion. You're not trying to change your emotion. Martin Luther King says, Jesus never said we're to like our enemies. We're to love them. And Martin Luther says, I have to tell you, there's people I don't like. I don't like how they treat this. I don't like how they treat me. I don't like how they treat the world. But yet I believe in this transforming power of agape and turning the other cheek, so I'm going to turn up and do the right thing. So he had said there's going to come a time in your life when you're going to have a choice on what to do with this person who's irritating you. And he says what Jesus is saying is agape it. Like if this person comes up and they come up and ask you, how would this person be for this job? If they're really the right person for the job, agape says you will support them and you will not retaliate. There's a great story Abraham Lincoln has about this agape time of love. He had this guy named Edwin Stanton, and Stanton's main job and main focus was to take Abraham Lincoln down. He made that his priority. He went all around the country saying, who wants this tall, lanky president who's useless and ignorant as president of the United States? So when Lincoln was elected, he was going through the resumes for Secretary of War, and he hired Stanton. And his cabinet said, do you know what he's like? He is going to destroy this cabinet. He's going to talk behind our back. He's going to do this. And Lincoln said, yes, but he's the best man for the job. Lincoln agapied him, and Stanton became his biggest and best supporters. And why this is because Lincoln and King and Jesus understood there's a transformational power in letting it go. It's never, 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 never going to work with eye to eye. We go eye to eye, turn the other cheek, which is a conscious choice, something we have to do, and then allow the transformation to occur. So what would it look like if in our lives, in our situations, we decided, I'm giving agape love. And agape means you can never receive anything back. They may only give you bitterness. They may only give you hatred. But we say, I am choosing this path of non-violent resistance. I'm choosing to let it go because I know greater is the one in me than what's going on with the eye-to-eye out in the world, and trusting and believing that. And that's what King has called us to do. That's what Jesus has called us to do. And that's what, if we want to transform the world, we can make a choice. So it's just simple. We do that one step at a time. We already have the tools. Pray for our enemies. Bless those that persecute us. Choose to be strong and courageous and to turn the other cheek. Ashley and the band is about to sing a song, if you guys want to come up. And this is what I'm going to ask you all to do during this song. Think about someone, or it can be a situation, it works in anything, maybe that you're having issues with, the person that tugs at your string. And say, I may not know how, but I'm willing to learn to be in agape. And just close your eyes and visualize this person or this situation. And say, because I'm choosing to go the path of non-violent resistance, I want to sing this song to you. So if anybody's comfortable, just think of that person or that situation, something that needs healed or resolved in your life. And let's begin this transforming act of agape love.